Esmin Green, a hard-working mother of 6, found herself in a situation no one could have anticipated. Escorted involuntarily by emergency services to Kings County Hospital, she was in desperate need of psychiatric care. As she sat in the waiting room for nearly 24 hours, her condition deteriorated rapidly. But the hospital staff seemed indifferent. The surveillance footage would later reveal a shocking truth. People passed by her multiple times, ignoring her distress. What happened over the next few hours would not only expose systemic failures in one of New York's largest hospitals, but also leave us questioning how someone could be left to die in plain sight. Esmin's collapse, caught on camera, was a tragic culmination of neglect, as she lay motionless on the cold hospital floor, while hospital staff simply walked by. How could this have happened? Why wasn't she helped? And most importantly, could this tragic death have been prevented? Before we dive deeper into the events leading up to Esmin's heartbreaking demise, I'd like to ask you for a small favor. As you can see, this channel is relatively new, and your support means a lot. By engaging with this video, whether through likes, comments, or subscribing, you're not just helping me, you're helping to bring these important stories to a wider audience. The more engagement this video receives, the more YouTube's algorithm will push it to others, allowing us to raise awareness about cases of medical malpractice that need to be addressed. Esmin Green, a life of responsibility and sacrifice. Esmin Elizabeth Green was born in 1959 in the small, scenic settlement of Louisville, nestled within Jamaica's St. Catherine Parish. From an early age, life demanded more from her than it did from most children. As the eldest of 13 siblings, Esmin became the natural leader of her household. Imagine the weight of that responsibility, guiding, caring for, and protecting so many young lives. It was a burden most would have struggled with, but Esmin took it on with strength and resilience. Her upbringing was anything but easy. The family faced poverty, and their daily lives were marked by financial strain. But tragedy struck when Esmin was just 20 years old. Her mother passed away, leaving Esmin to shoulder an even greater burden. Now, as the sole matriarch of the household, she had no choice but to grow up faster than ever, transforming into a caretaker overnight. The loss of her mother became the turning point that defined Esmin's future, shaping her as the unwavering pillar her siblings could rely on. Esmin's determination to provide for her family became her driving force. She took on various jobs, no task too small, no job too menial, just to make ends meet. But she wasn't content with just scraping by. Esmin's entrepreneurial spirit took over, and soon she launched multiple businesses, starting with a modest dress shop. She expanded her efforts, eventually managing a wholesale fishing business and a small import company. Her relentless work ethic allowed her to rise above the challenges life threw at her. For a time, Esmin appeared to have struck a balance between being the caregiver her family needed and the successful businesswoman she had become. But her success didn't come without sacrifice. As the eldest child and now a business owner, Esmin lived a life of constant juggling, balancing the needs of her family with the demands of her growing enterprises. Her ability to manage both was a testament to her strength, but deep down, the weight of responsibility never left her. How long could she continue this balancing act before the pressure became too much to bear? Family growth and increasing responsibilities. As if caring for her younger siblings wasn't enough, Esmin started her own family, welcoming 6 children into the world. With each new addition to her family, her responsibilities multiplied. Raising 6 children of her own, while still supporting her siblings, was no easy feat. Esmin faced an ever-growing financial strain, constantly asking herself, how can I ensure a better life for my children? Over the years, Esmin's role as the provider only intensified. Her once thriving businesses in Jamaica were no longer enough to sustain the many mouths she had to feed. As her children grew, their needs evolved. from education to healthcare to basic living expenses. And while Esmin had done everything in her power to support her family, she realized that the opportunities available in Jamaica could only take her so far. A decision loomed in the distance, one that would alter her life forever. Would she leave her homeland behind in search of better opportunities? Would she risk everything to give her children the future they deserved? These questions weighed heavily on Esmin, and soon her path became clear. She would take a bold leap of faith, one that countless others have taken before her. Immigration to the United States, a new chapter. In the late 1990s, Esmin decided to move to New York City, specifically Brooklyn, in search of better financial opportunities. Like many immigrants, she hoped to provide a better life for her children by earning more abroad than she could in Jamaica. Leaving behind her family, Esmin embraced the immigrant experience with resilience. She worked hard to provide for her children back home, often sending money, groceries, and gifts. Her selflessness extended beyond her family. Esmin became deeply involved in her local church community, where she was known for her generosity and her devotion to helping others. Esmin quickly formed strong bonds within the Jesus is Lord Sanctuary Church in Brooklyn, where she became an integral part of the congregation. She was heavily involved in youth programs, ran various church activities, and formed close friendships with fellow immigrants, including Pastor Marilyn Johnson. These friends became her support system, but even their support couldn't shield Esmin from the mental health challenges that began to surface. The onset of mental illness. By the mid-2000s, Esmin Green's mental health began a rapid and alarming decline. What initially appeared to be homesickness and the emotional toll of being separated from her children soon spiraled into something far more serious. Her extended depressive episodes became more frequent and concerning, marked by erratic behavior that could no longer be explained by emotional distress alone. Her church friends and roommates, who had long been her support system, began noticing disturbing changes. Esmin would sometimes pace back and forth for hours on end, unable to calm herself. There were days when she would remain completely silent, lost in her own world, or would show up disheveled, unable to explain what was happening to her. It was clear that something was deeply wrong. Between 2007 and 2008, Esmin was hospitalized multiple times for what were later identified as severe mental health issues. She was eventually diagnosed with chronic paranoid schizophrenia and psychosis, a combination that left her deeply disconnected from reality. This condition brought with it symptoms like delusions, disorganized thinking, and emotional instability, symptoms that could be managed but not cured. Esmin was prescribed powerful medications like Haldol, Risperdal, Ativan, and Xanax to help manage her condition. However, like many who struggle with mental health, Esmin was often non-compliant with her treatment, possibly out of fear of the stigma attached to mental illness, or perhaps because the medication made her feel less like herself. Kings County Hospital, a history of neglect. By the time Esmin Green was admitted to Kings County Hospital in Brooklyn in June 2008, the institution was already infamous for its deep-rooted issues. This wasn't the first time Kings County had made headlines for all the wrong reasons. The hospital had been sued multiple times over claims of neglect and mistreatment, particularly in its psychiatric ward. The Comprehensive Psychiatric Emergency Program, CPEP, where Esmin would spend her final hours, was described by former patients as a chamber of filth and decay, a place that seemed to strip people of dignity rather than restore them to health. Overcrowded, understaffed, and with medical professionals that often lacked proper training, Kings County's psychiatric unit was a place where the vulnerable were all too often abandoned. Despite this harrowing reputation, Esmin had been brought to this very hospital several times in the years prior, always ending up in the same psychiatric unit with conditions that were far from suitable for healing. On June 18, 2008, Esmin found herself back at Kings County Hospital once more, this time brought in by police and emergency services after exhibiting signs of erratic behavior. Her diagnosis of chronic paranoid schizophrenia meant that she was involuntarily admitted, but this was no ordinary case of psychiatric distress. What Esmin didn't know was that this visit would be her last. Esmin Green's arrival and medical neglect. Esmin Green arrived at Kings County Hospital Center at around 6:30 a.m. on June 18, 2008, escorted by emergency services after displaying severe symptoms of psychosis and agitation. Due to her deteriorating mental state, New York state law allowed for her involuntary admission, a measure taken when someone poses a clear danger to themselves or others. For Esmin, this action was not just necessary, it was urgent. However, upon arrival, urgency seemed to disappear. Instead of receiving the urgent care she desperately needed, Esmin was placed in the psychiatric emergency waiting room, where she was supposed to undergo a full psychiatric evaluation. But in a cruel twist of fate, that evaluation never came. Despite the protocols that should have been in place, Esmin was left sitting for nearly 24 hours, without even basic medical intervention. Imagine sitting in a waiting room, vulnerable, while the very people responsible for your care simply overlook you. How could a system meant to protect its patients be so deeply flawed? Under standard hospital procedure, Esmin should have undergone a series of routine medical tests, blood work, an electrocardiogram, ECG, and a comprehensive physical examination to ensure her physical well-being. These basic tests would have uncovered a deadly condition silently building within her: deep vein thrombosis, DVT, a life-threatening clot that forms in the legs due to long periods of immobility. Esmin sat for hours, unseen and unattended, as the clot grew larger, a ticking time bomb that would soon claim her life. As the minutes turned to hours, hospital staff passed by Esmin countless times, indifferent to her distress. No one checked her vital signs. No one performed the tests that could have saved her life. Had even one person taken the time to intervene, the early signs of a pulmonary embolism, like swelling, discomfort, or a rapid heartbeat, could have been caught. A simple dose of blood thinners could have prevented her tragic end. But in a cruel twist, the very professionals tasked with safeguarding her well-being were the ones who sealed her fate. Esmin's collapse and tragic death. By the early morning of June 19, 2008, nearly 24 hours after her arrival at Kings County Hospital, Esmin's body could no longer endure the neglect. At approximately 5:32 a.m., Esmin suddenly collapsed in the waiting room. She slumped forward in her chair before hitting the cold, hard floor face first. What should have been a moment that spurred immediate action became yet another horrifying display of disregard. Security cameras captured the harrowing sequence of events. Esmin's body convulsed slightly as the untreated blood clot, a result of deep vein thrombosis, traveled to her lungs, causing a pulmonary embolism. It was a life-threatening condition, yet there she lay, motionless on the floor, while hospital staff walked by, seemingly unfazed. Nurses, security guards, and even a psychiatrist glanced at her, but no one stepped forward to help. It's impossible to imagine the horror, knowing you're in a hospital surrounded by healthcare workers, and yet completely invisible in your moment of need. The surveillance footage showed a heart-wrenching display of negligence. At one point, a staff member nudged a chair closer to Esmin's lifeless body, as though to obscure the view rather than assist her. Even then, no one intervened. How could so many people witness her collapse and still do nothing? For nearly an hour, Esmin lay dying, without a single soul responding to her plight. It wasn't until 6:35 a.m., almost a full hour after her collapse, that a nurse finally approached her. But by then, the damage was done. Esmin Green was gone, Esmin's pulmonary embolism, though fatal, was treatable had it been caught in time. Simple medical interventions, blood thinners, or clot removal procedures could have saved her life. But the hospital staff's inaction sealed her fate. How can a place meant to heal become a stage for such tragedy? How could Esmin's life have been valued so little in a place where it should have mattered most? Cover-up and falsified records. In the immediate aftermath of Esmin Green's death, the hospital's negligence did not end with her tragic collapse. Instead of owning up to their inaction, several hospital staff members resorted to falsifying medical records in a shocking attempt to cover up their gross neglect. Medical entries made after Esmin's death suggested that she had been active and moving around during the very hours she lay face down, dying on the cold floor. One nurse falsely documented that Esmin had gotten up to use the bathroom at 6:00 a.m., long after she had collapsed. Another note claimed that she was sitting quietly at 6:20 a.m., despite the reality that she had already been lying motionless for nearly an hour by then. These fraudulent entries were part of a deliberate attempt to hide the fact that Esmin had been ignored for over an hour while in critical condition. However, the surveillance footage told a different story. The footage clearly showed that Esmin had been lying on the floor during the exact times the staff claimed she was moving. This damning evidence contradicted the false entries and implicated multiple staff members, including nurses, security guards, and even doctors, in an effort to cover up their inaction. Investigation and public outcry. Once the surveillance footage was made public, it ignited a wave of public outrage. The New York Civil Liberties Union, NYCLU, quickly condemned the hospital, calling out the systemic neglect that had contributed to Esmin Green's death. This public pressure led the NYC Department of Investigation, DOI, to launch an in-depth inquiry into the failures at Kings County Hospital, particularly within its notoriously mismanaged psychiatric department. The investigation revealed deep-rooted problems that had plagued the hospital for years. Chronic understaffing, inadequate training, and poor communication between medical personnel had long been the norm, especially in the psychiatric emergency unit where Esmin had been admitted. Kings County Hospital was no stranger to lawsuits and malpractice claims, but Esmin's case highlighted the culmination of these ongoing failures. The DOI report underscored the hospital staff's inability to perform even the most basic medical evaluations. Routine tests, such as physical examinations, electrocardiograms, ECG, and blood work, which could have identified Esmin's deep vein thrombosis, DVT, were simply not performed. Instead, the investigation found that psychiatric patients at the hospital were often restrained or sedated without receiving proper care, a clear breach of medical ethics. Legal and disciplinary actions. In response to the growing public outrage and the damning investigation findings, Kings County Hospital was forced to take immediate action. 7 hospital staff members, including nurses, security guards, and doctors, were either fired or suspended for their roles in the neglect and subsequent cover-up of Esmin's death. Multiple lawsuits followed, with Esmin's family filing a wrongful death lawsuit against both the hospital and the New York City Health and Hospitals Corporation, HHC, citing gross negligence and improper care. The legal battles highlighted just how deeply embedded the systemic failures were, with Esmin's case becoming the centerpiece of a wider discussion about the failures in psychiatric care at Kings County Hospital and beyond. Legal consequences and autopsy findings. Esmin's family, with support from the NYCLU, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Kings County Hospital and the New York City Health and Hospitals Corporation, HHC. The lawsuit accused the hospital staff of gross negligence, claiming that their failure to act directly resulted in Esmin's death. The evidence, particularly the damning surveillance footage and falsified medical records, highlighted the hospital's attempt to cover up the neglect, further strengthening the family's case. In 2009, the city of New York agreed to settle the case, paying $2 million in compensation to Esmin's family. Although the settlement marked a legal resolution, it brought no true justice for the unnecessary loss of Esmin's life. The autopsy report provided critical medical clarity, confirming that Esmin had died from a pulmonary embolism caused by deep vein thrombosis, DVT. The report highlighted how her prolonged immobility led to the formation of blood clots, a condition that, if properly monitored, could have been detected and treated. The autopsy also noted her underlying mental health condition, paranoid schizophrenia, which, while not the direct cause of her death, added complexity to her condition and care. Had the hospital taken steps to evaluate her physical health alongside her psychiatric symptoms, her life could have been saved. Aftermath and reforms. Esmin Green's tragic death acted as a catalyst for reforms at Kings County Hospital. In the wake of the public outcry and the resulting investigations, the hospital was forced to address the systemic failures within its psychiatric department. A series of reforms were enacted, including stricter monitoring protocols, increased staffing levels, and the introduction of comprehensive medical assessments for all psychiatric patients upon arrival. These changes were aimed at preventing another tragedy like Esmin's from ever occurring again. Despite the reforms, Esmin's case remains a haunting reminder of the shortcomings of the healthcare system, particularly in how vulnerable psychiatric patients are treated. Her death continues to serve as a rallying cry for mental health advocates, pushing for improved care standards and systemic changes across healthcare institutions. Outro and audience engagement. What are your thoughts on this tragic case? Do you think more could have been done to prevent this kind of negligence in hospitals? What measures would you suggest to improve psychiatric care in hospitals like Kings County? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story eye-opening, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories on medical malpractices and healthcare failures. Press the bell icon to stay updated on our latest videos.